Start then, as it's 7. I know we've got more people still joining, so but we will get started here in the Zoom and live on Facebook as well. Welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening for the second in our GFTU Solidarity series webinars. An opportunity to explore solidarity, not just as words on a page, but as meaningful actions, and to look at examples of solidarity across the movement, both historically and currently. My name's Gawain Little, and I'm General Secretary of the General Federation of Trade Unions. And I am really, really pleased to welcome this evening's speaker, Ray Goodspeed. Ray was an activist with Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners during the 84 to 85 miners' strike, as portrayed in the movie Pride, which I have to say is one of my very favourite films. I can't get to the end without crying, but I think it's a superb film, and obviously because it's based on such an important movement. Ray was a member of Lesbians and Gays Support the Printers and Trade Unionists Against Section 28, and was a volunteer for London Lesbian and Gay Switchboard. He's campaigned on many different labour and trade union causes, and is a supporter of the socialist website Left Horizons. He's a Labour Party member and was until recently CLP Secretary, and is also a member of Unite Community and Industrial Workers of the World. And this evening, Ray's going to be talking, as we were just saying, on the 40th anniversary of the miners' strike. Ray will be talking about the movement Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, the work that they did then. And I think there are so many current lessons around solidarity that we can draw from that story and the associated movements that Ray's been involved in. So Ray, really, really pleased to welcome you this evening, and over to you. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks. I mean, it goes without saying that I'm really, really happy to be speaking at an event like this. This presses all my buttons. An organisation aimed at boosting solidarity and trade union organising. What's not to like? Because solidarity, really, I mean, our slogan in LGSM is always solidarity forever. And our song written on the back of our banner was solidarity forever. We had the words, the lyrics written down on the back of the banner, which is a good technique if you're marching behind a banner. But also it's really good. I always start off because it's really good to have any opportunity to remember the miners' strike itself. There have been attempts over the last 40 years to present LGSM as heroes in some way. Well, let's be clear, the real heroes were the miners. They took on the government, they took on the vicious brutality of the armed state, they took on the press, they took on everybody, took on the Labour leadership, some right-wing trade union leaders, and they were failed to be starved back to work. They lasted an entire year on strike, which is nothing short of miraculous. But also, less dramatically, it's the organisational triumph. They kept their organisations fed and the strike organised for a year. The actual military precision of that level of organisation was extraordinary, and that's something I think we need to. Workers can sometimes think that we need clever people to sort of plan and organise stuff for us, and we don't. The miners' strike proved that people who'd never done anything like this in the past can come together and be effective organisers. But we should never forget also that the miners' strike failed. And it failed because of lack of that S word, the lack of solidarity. Ultimately, it would have won if other workers had come out on strike and supported it, but they didn't. But getting into the LGSM specifically, I think the first question to answer is why? Why did we do it? And I think it's important to say that for us, it was all about the miners. It was then, it is now, it's all about the miners. There's a line in the movie about, these gay people with their agenda. Anybody who's seen the movie will remember the horrible Maureen saying about our gay agenda. But to say we haven't got an agenda isn't just a sort of, it wasn't a rhetorical point. We really, really didn't have any agenda. We would have supported the miners if they'd told us to go and replicate ourselves. Our support was absolutely unconditional because we supported the miners because we knew that they had to win. Because if the Tories had beaten the miners, and the Tories did beat the miners, let's be clear, they would then just move on to take on and destroy the entire trade union movement, and all workers would suffer. All workers of every sex and race and sexuality and gender, all workers would suffer. And so they did. And we've had the result of the miners losing was 40 years of retreat and austerity and worse conditions for working people. So the miners had to win, and we wanted to support them. Really, most of the people involved in founding LGSM were already active collecting money. We were already active on the left. And really, we saw LGSM as just another place to collect. We were already collecting, many of us, on street corners, in workplaces, in trade union branches. So, well, why don't we collect outside gay pubs and pubs as well? And so we did that, and that was just a way of raising money. We didn't see it as a way of pushing a gay rights agenda necessarily, although, we kind of hoped it might, but that was just very much secondary. And we weren't as naive or as pretty as they present us in the movie. Some of us were pretty, but by no means all of us, as you can tell. I think many of us also, the people who founded the organisation, had already existing links with the labour movement. There was no question of sticking a pin in and saying, "Where's the coalfield?" like they do in the movie. We all knew where the coalfields were. We were members of parties which had members in the coalfields. Although one interesting little point on this is I was a shop steward I worked for a local council in London at the time. I was a shop steward in my department, but I was not out throughout the entire 1984 trade union miners' strike. I personally was in the closet. I wasn't able to come out at work, and I was actually being bullied at work, in fact. And so my own union rep told me not to come out because it was too dangerous. But a few months later, I did come out, and it was okay. So what did we do? I think the first thing we say, what did we do? And I think obviously people know from the movie that the Mike Jackson and Mark Ashton collected money for the miners on the first Pride March back in 1984. Not the first March, but the Pride March in 1984. And that was in July, remember, or the end of June. That's like 4 months into the strike. And then that went so well that we had another meeting in July, about 2 weeks later, I think, in Mark's council flat in the Elephant and Castle. And 11 men turned up to found it. And I was very privileged, and I've always been privileged ever since to be one of those 11 men. Later on, we grew to many more than the movie had. We had an average attendance of 30 odd. We couldn't meet in Gaze the Word Bookshop. We had to meet in the top room of a pub because Gaze the Word Bookshop was hugely too small. At our peak, we had like 50 regular attenders at our weekly meetings, sitting on the floor, planning stuff in the absence, I may say, of Facebook, mobile phones, texting, or anything of that kind. We had to just sit there till everything was organised. And of course, later on, we recruited women to the organisation as well. Not so many as men, only maybe 10, I think, women altogether was probably active in the LGSM compared to like 50 odd guys. And also we recruited less politically organised people. We started to recruit people from our collections. We'd be collecting outside pubs, and then people would come up to us afterwards and say, "Oh, that's really good. I support the miners. Can I help?" And so they joined in that collection, came to like next meeting, and we sort of sucked them into our organisation. We collected pretty much in every pub and every club in London. There's quite a few of them, and so it was actually quite fun, I have to say. Having an excuse to go to every pub in London was quite handy. And so we did. We used to have a few jars and then wait outside with a bucket afterwards and collect in every pub. And that was every pub, like Leather Queen pubs, drag bars, everything, ordinary local pubs in the suburbs, everything. And I think having got all this money, we were continually surprised by how much money we collected, and eventually, so we twinned with Onslow in South Wales and the Swansea Neath and Delice miner support group. Now, the reason we twinned was not because the NUM as organisation wouldn't take our money. That's another slight fib in the movie. Earlier in July, all the money of the South Wales Mining Federation had been seized by the government. The funds of the NUM were being sequestered because the NUM was technically in breach of the Tory trade union laws. And this had been following hard on the heels of the Battle of Orgreave in the middle of June, and then in July the funds were sequestered, and PricewaterhouseCoopers was being sent all over the globe trying to track down where the NUM had stashed its money. And so we had to twin with a particular community, and we sent it to South Wales. And even then, some of the money we sent to South Wales was put in a local Labour councillor's, local Tom Jones, would you believe? It was put in his private bank account, and the local bank manager tried to freeze his personal bank account because he suspected there might be miners' money in it. But given the fact that the bank manager lived in the community, and he was gently persuaded, shall we say, to release the funds, and so that money was accessed. Altogether, we collected about £20,000, which people tell me is about £90,000 now. It would be. And people, if you've seen the movie or if you've otherwise heard, you'll remember the Pits and Perverts Ball at the Electric Ballroom in Camden in North London. Another £5,000 was raised there. Most of the money we raised there went to buying a nice red van for the miners. And I think it's also useful to point out that the van eventually was decorated with a "donated by lesbians, gay support the miners" motif on the door. And we knew nothing about that. That was an idea entirely. We only knew about that when we first saw it. That was done by the South Wales mining communities as a thank you to us. We didn't ask them to do it. They just did it as a thank you. And it's a particular pride, I think, that a source of pride for me, that in that particular those valleys where we were supporting them, along with other unions like NALGO, which is now Unison, Brent NALGO, or is now Brent Unison, was also twinned with our village. Nobody went back. The strike was solid till the very end in that part of South Wales, which is good. They didn't starve them back to work. But what we did wasn't the amazing thing. The amazing thing was the response we had from the mining communities. That was amazing. And you think, well, why? Lots of other people, I'm sure Brent Nalgo had given their money to South Wales and been invited down. Why was it so amazing to invite us down? I mean, lots of us. There was 3 minibuses full of us. It wasn't like a small thing. It was like a mini invasion. We had 27 screaming queens and lesbians descending on a tiny village in West Wales, where really it was just coal and sheep, really, and Welsh speaking as well. Why was it so amazing for them to invite us down? I think to understand that, you have to understand the conditions and the national profile of the lesbian gay community at the time. Remember, then we had no legal rights then at all. It wasn't illegal to be gay, but it was illegal to ask anybody to have sex with you. That was called soliciting for an immoral purpose. If you propositioned someone, and if that person happened to be a policeman, he'd arrest you for it. We had no legal rights at work explicitly. I mean, I said I'm speaking to a trade union organisation here. There was an employment tribunal taken in, I think, 1981 in Scotland. There was a handyman at a children's camp. He was sacked for being gay. He took it to tribunal and lost on the grounds that, well, he was no threat to children. The employer and the tribunal accepted he was no threat to children at all, but that there was a reasonable fear that parents would think he was, therefore he was justifiably sacked. People being sacked for wearing badges, people being sacked for just being lesbians. Also, there was no legal right over your children. It was quite routine to lose custody of children in a divorce if one of the partners was gay or lesbian. In the labour movement, there was no mainstream support for gay rights in the labour movement. You had the GLC and the important work done by Ken Livingstone as the leader of the Greater London Council, later mayor, but in those days he was leader of the council. And some sections of some white collar unions were okay, not the whole union. Heroically, from the 70s, there were some gay groups had been set up in unions for like teachers and social workers, had set up their kind of gay teachers, gay social worker support groups. And that had achieved a degree of success. There were isolated examples of social workers or teachers that were victimized by their bosses, who were then supported by their colleagues, and they won those disputes. I mean, they weren't sacked. So that was a small victory. The Labour Party nationally had no position on gay rights. There was no commitment in the Labour Party before 1985 to change the law on homosexuality at all. Kinnock was, well, what can I say legally? He was teetering on the edge of homophobia, shall we say. He was not an ally of or a supporter of gay rights. and there was even sections of the far left, the revolutionary left even, who were not that great on the issue at the time. But more than all of that stuff, I mean, oh, by the way, in Scotland, up to 1980, homosexuality was still illegal in Scotland, illegal, completely illegal. It was only legal in England and Wales up until 1980. But the worst thing was when you're growing up, as I did as a teenager in the 70s, was that we were seen as by the newspapers and society as a whole and at school as pathetic, ridiculous, mentally ill, dangerous, and of course, after your children. So given that, to be invited in that context, and with AIDS, of course, just beginning to come into the newspapers, it was not such a high profile then. That was a couple of years later, but in 1984, there was certainly the beginnings of that AIDS panic. In that situation, to invite us to stay in their homes in South Wales was nothing short of miraculous, and it's something we never expected, and we were deeply moved by it. It was for us, it was for many of the members of LGSM who were from working class backgrounds themselves, it's felt very much as coming home, like a reconnection with our class, rather than any kind of oh, we're here and the workers are over there, and let's support the workers. It was like reconnecting with the workers we'd left behind when many of us had run away from other towns to go to London in order to lead an open gay life. Especially since in London, when you got there, the gay scene itself was actually quite middle class. It was culturally kind of middle class and artsy and sort of fancy pantsy. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that easy. Being working class man in the gay scene, it wasn't that easy. It wasn't sort of culturally very familiar. And so going down to this miners' welfare hall in South Wales and being accepted so readily was deeply moving, and it absolutely solidified our support for the miners' strike even more than it was before. It's important to say that the initial hostility shown in the movie is fictitious. It didn't exist, or at least if it existed, it was very, very much less than was presented, and it was kept completely away from us. Nobody was horrible to us for 1 second in South Wales. I guess there were people who didn't like us, but they were a tiny minority and they were kept away, or they chose to stay away. And absolutely crucially, they never voted not to take our money. That the big thing in the movie, sorry, spoiler alert, when they voted to take the money, to not receive our money, that's completely fictitious, and it's the only bit of the movie which kind of irks me, I have to say, because that's a real slander on the miners. They never ever voted against us. In fact, on March the 3rd, 1985, when the vote was taken to return to work, LGSM was in South Wales. We were actually in the village on our second big visit. And we were there while all those recriminations and that tragedy and that anger and hurt was expressed. That literally wall punching kind of frustration and anger as the miners realised they'd been defeated, and we were there and part of that. I think the importance of LGSM is we took the labour movement into the lesbian and gay community, right into the scene, not lobbying leaders or restricting ourselves to political or community groups. We took it to every single pub. Every pub. You couldn't, nobody had gone drinking in London in the whole year without had a bucket shaken in front of them. And that was interesting, taking that kind of class politics directly to the gay scene. As I said, leather bars and drag queens. Leather bars are more Tory, I have to say. By the way, I think it's because if you can afford the leathers, you're probably more well off. I don't know, but there's something about drag pubs give more to minors than leather bars. Somebody can write a book on that one day. But of course, also our existence took the issues of lesbian gay rights, but not because we wanted to, just inevitably it took those issues and built solidarity inside the labour movement, and that was obviously repaid later on in 1985. First of all, the TUC conference voted in favour of a gay rights motion, and later on, because the TUC have huge numbers, the unions in the TUC also have huge numbers of votes inside the Labour Party conference. So once the unions had voted for it in the TUC, it's pretty much guaranteed to go through Labour Party conference as well, which it did, and that allowed for future advances. It didn't solve everything. It didn't say, oh well, we've won now, we've passed the policy, because and you surely must know that conference can pass all sorts of policies which are ignored by the leadership. And Kinnock, absolutely, Neil Kinnock back in the day, the unelectable Neil Kinnock, certainly wanted to ignore those policies. But the trade unions were good. I recommend a book called, oh, you can't see it. There you can. No, I can't show it because of the background. Champions of Equality by Peter Purton, which is a very good book about the history of gay rights in the trade union movement. And long before the legal changes of the Blair government and after 2000, trade unions, like workplace by workplace, community by community, had fought against victimization, bullying, things like getting inheriting your pension rights from the works pension schemes, issues like getting free travel for your partner if you work on the railways. You know, all those issues there's the local government, Labour local government organisations, local councils. They gradually started giving succession rights to council tenancies for gay partners and so on, all of which happened before the Blair reforms. So winning in those conferences in 1985 was just the beginning of solidarity for the Labour movement. The solidarity came first, and the legal changes eventually caught up with it. Earlier on, I used the word allyship by mistake. Allyship is not a word I generally use, because allyship it implies altruism, that you're supporting somebody else because you feel sorry for them. But let's be clear, both in LGSM then and now, and my whole politics, it's not altruism. I don't feel sorry for gay people, or now particularly trans people. We all need to win. We all need to win for all of us. And so it's like, it's all of our battles. If somebody's oppressing a working class person, if they're oppressing one of us, they're oppressing all of us. It's not like we're doing it just because we feel sorry for them. We're doing it because any attack on any section of working people on grounds of race, sex, gender, anything is an attack on the class as a whole, and it's divide and rule. And we have that basis. Of course, when the movie came out in 2014, that came out at just the right time, because after many decades of sort of neoliberal retreat, when both even the TUC and the Labour Party and the left in general, really, not everybody except really the revolutionary left, had almost given up on class politics. There's a retreat from class politics to a kind of, you know, a kind of accommodation with austerity and neoliberalism and privatization and so on and so forth. And at the same time, people sought their radicalism in identity. They quite correctly focused on issues around race and sex and class and disability and sexuality and so on, which is fine. Clearly, I'll be the last person to say you shouldn't do that. That would be absurd. But it became, unfortunately, isolated from class politics. And what was great about the 2014, when the movie came out, it came out in just the right time, because you'd had the big international crash of 2011, which put class politics back on the agenda big time. And then it took a couple of years to percolate through. So people were ready to hear me go around the country speaking in the movie and talking about the need to unify working class people, and to, you know, I could come out as a class struggle queen with a clear conscience. And people were surprised, younger people who'd kind of gone to college maybe, or had been sort of brought up on identity politics only, nothing wrong with identity politics, but identity politics only, looked at me as if, my God, are you allowed to say that? Are you allowed to say that class is the important thing? And they were sort of set free by the fact that I said it, so therefore they could. It's solidarity is all for one and one for all. That's the point. And there was a need, again, for them, for those people who wanted to achieve rights for minorities, to reconnect with the labour movement. And in 2014, obviously, there was a beginning of a fight back. You had more and more, and eventually, of course, you know, in the last couple of years, the trade unionism has really come back, and you've now got fighting trade unions and proper long strikes and battles, which were missing for decades, and now they're coming back with a vengeance, and it's just so beautiful for me to see. I can't tell you how much it gladdens the heart of a sad old man to see these things happening. Because you see, there's a difference between the labour movement's approach to these matters and what you might call academia. Because if you're working academia, if you're a university professor, you get your kudos, you get your prestige by coming up with a new theory. It rewards novelty. You can you come up with a completely brand new theory and a new book, and it's the flavor of the month, and that's different. So difference is rewarded. But you see, the labour movement, we're nothing without unity and solidarity. If we don't stick together, we can't afford to split ourselves off, because that's the road to certain defeat. So unity and solidarity is what's crucial to us. So if we have differences in the movement over these issues, we have to just thrash them out and sort them out, and unify. We can't sort of take some kind of some sort of personality interest in being original and different, because that's just weakens us all. Intersectionality, this idea that we need to fight on sexuality and race and sex and class altogether, that's fine, but that shouldn't be used as an example to make sort of smaller and smaller and smaller sections of campaigning. We should all do that. We should all fight for our interests as Black people, as women, as gay people, as trans people, and then come together and support us all. I mean, the motif of the Pride movie is this kind of, handshaking. I think I can do this on this strange story. I support you, you support me. And I think that's the important point. Of course, for many years, because of this, the identity policy, my involvement in the labour movement didn't really hinge around my homosexuality at all. I had various positions in the labour movement. I was secretary of my CLP. I had positions in unions. I had all sorts of other positions, chair. And my sexuality was known, but kind of completely irrelevant. Nobody would dream of thinking, oh, Ray, he's the gay secretary of that or the gay chair of that. We got to the stage where gay people, lesbian and gay people and bisexual people were kind of integrated into the movement. But of course, we thought we'd kind of won on that basis. But of course, no, we haven't, because this vicious and vile backlash against trans people has now come, and now we have to fight those battles all over again. All of that kind of media demonization I talked about in 1980s against gay people is now as bad or worse against trans people, and it's utterly disgusting. And we now need to fight. So there is a need now to have like a more to highlight LGBT struggles again, which have sort of gone to sleep really in the labour movement, because we're kind of, not completely, but kind of won. But now with this attack on trans people, we really have to kind of foreground that and make sure that trans people now are integrated completely into the labour movement, and the labour movement itself supports trans people. The labour movement either supports all its members or it's weakened. And I think that's the key, and that's what solidarity is all about. Solidarity forever.